Good morning. It's so good to see so many of your faces here this morning. For those of you I can't see but who can hear me or see me, welcome. I love to see the smiles along the top column of the Zoom app here. I wonder how everyone's doing today. Let's all take a deep breath in, because I imagine however we're doing, we probably all need one. And let it out. It's good to be together in whatever way we can. I want to give a reminder that we will keep ourselves on mute, those of us who are not leading the service or when it's not our turn to lead. Even when we're singing, even though I encourage you to sing along at home to our hymns, but the cacophony of noises in the middle of worship is probably not helpful to any of us. So we'll keep ourselves muted and be together in face only for a little while. And I want to remind you of another thing, which is that if you need to talk about feelings, big or small, about how you're doing, if you're struggling financially, if you're struggling emotionally, spiritually in this time of crisis, please reach out to me. I'm here for you in that. And with that, I invite us all to enter a space of worship together. Let's start with a chalice lighting this morning. So if you have a chalice at home, or if you want a quick run and get one, a little candle, a birthday candle, whatever you've got, I invite you to light it with us together now. And as we light our chalices in our homes, we'll recite, "We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together." My parents' house is on a steep hill. Their community is rural, and the homes on their road are spread fairly far apart, but the families who live there all know one another. My mom mentioned to me during a recent phone call that the young adult women who live next door, who have been quarantined with their parents since being sent home from colleges whose campus is closed, were taking turns zooming down that hill on their stomachs on a Razor scooter. It made me recall the decision of my brother and his best friend a couple decades ago to ride a sled at full speed down the center of that same steep, snow-covered road before the plows came. They got into a fair bit of trouble for that choice, but they maintain it was well worth the thrill. The capacity of adolescents for creative risk-taking is remarkable. And I think that this, in part anyway, is why we come to church. This is why we gather in communities of multiple generations, because each age carries a particular wisdom that is, if we let it be, a blessing to the whole. Let us open this morning with these words from Madeleine L'Engle. "I am still every age that I have been. Because I was once a child, I am always a child. Because I was once a searching adolescent, given to moods and ecstasies, these are still part of me and always will be. Far too many people think that forgetting what it is like to think and feel and touch and smell and taste and see and hear like a 3-year-old or a 13-year-old or a 23-year-old means being grown up. When I'm with these people, I feel that if this is what it means to be a grown-up, then I don't ever want to be one. Instead, if I can retain a child's awareness and joy and be 51, then I will really learn what it means to be grown up. Let us sing together this morning. From our own homes, let us sing our opening hymn, "The Morning Hangs a Signal." I want to tell you a true story this morning. The story of Ellen Craft. Ellen Craft was born into slavery in 1826 in Clinton, Georgia. Her mother was an enslaved woman. Her father was the man who enslaved her, and many others. Ellen was separated from her mother and siblings and sent to another plantation when she was only 11. She married William Craft when she was 20 years old. And 2 years later, the young couple decided to make an escape attempt. Ellen dressed and passed as a wealthy white man, and William posed as her own personal servant. She wore her right arm in a sling to disguise the fact that she could not write. They took a series of trains and ships to Boston where they could be free. There, they got connected with a circle of local abolitionists, including Unitarian minister Theodore Parker. When the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 put the Crafts' liberty in jeopardy, even in the North, Parker housed them in defiance of this unjust law until they were able to get somewhere safer. He purportedly wrote his sermons during that time with a sword and pistol on his desk, prepared to protect the Crafts from capture. Later that year, Ellen and William escaped to England, where they were finally truly free. Ellen, having learned to read and write, wrote on behalf of the abolition movement and spent the remainder of her life working on the causes of emancipation, fair access to education for all children, and women's suffrage. And this is the end of our story. In this community, we share both our joys and our sorrows with one another. We hold each other in our celebrations and in our pain. So I'd like to invite you this morning, if you have joys or sorrows on your heart, to share them in the chat box or hold them dearly and silently in your heart if that feels more right. If you have a joy or a sorrow to share this morning, please do so now. For all these joys and sorrows shared this morning, and for all those that remain in the silence of our hearts, let it be known we are with you. And now is the time in our service where we invite you into the spiritual practice of generosity. I invite you this morning, if you're able, to give an offering to the church. And there are a few ways during this time that you can make that possible. You can write a check to the church. I'm going to put up a slide showing these different ways. So you can send an offering if you're able by check to the church's address, which is on your screen now. You can make a donation online on the church website, which is also on your screen at canandaiguauu.org/connect. And if you make a note that your donation is to go toward this morning's offering, then a quarter of it will be shared with our service partner, Universal. And I want to note during this time of generosity that if this is a hard time for you to give, that's okay. If you're struggling financially and you need help from us, if you need help from your community, you can also reach out to me privately and we can talk about whether the minister's discretionary fund is able to help you. So I encourage you, if you're struggling, to do that. If you're not struggling, I invite you to give generously this morning. And now is the time in our service for centering and shared silence. I invite you to get comfortable in your seat. Let your feet find some part of the floor or the earth beneath you. Take a deep breath in and out. Maybe let your eyes fall closed as we center ourselves and share a time of brief silence together. Tiny pea shoots poke their faces toward the sun. They were nothing a week ago, living only in the garden of my imagination, wrapped up in a small round seed. Now they push past pebbles and dirt and compost to drink in the morning air. Their weed sisters struggle fiercely, nudging up through concrete to spread their arms and dance in freedom. The tenacity of life must be wild in me too. When I titled this service after the Who song, The Kids Are All Right, months ago, I had planned to lift up the beauty of youth and many youth-led justice movements worldwide, and we will get there. But it's important right now to talk first about how the kids are manifestly not all right. In the spirit of our Easter commitment to lament where lament is due, here it comes. Millennials, my generation, who admittedly can only be referred to as kids or young people in the context of church demographics, came of age 10 or so years ago in an economy in collapse. We began adulthood under the crush of massive school debt, with limited job prospects, expensive or non-existent healthcare that's created another mountain of debt, and a growing chasm between rich and poor. Now, having never recovered from that rough start, we are disproportionately employed in retail, restaurants, and the gig economy, where we're facing either mass layoffs or exposure to extreme risk in a world where it's hard not to hear essential worker and think the true meaning must be expendable worker. This generation are disproportionately renters who have neither the means to stay housed without employment nor the safety net of property to sell in case of extreme emergency. And the actually young folks who are younger than my generation, they are not all right either. Generation Z, or Zoomers as they're sometimes called, the generation that are now tweens, teens, and early 20s young adults, are struggling too. Many are just now entering adulthood and independence in a job market that does not exist. None of that generation can remember a time we were not at war. Plenty are not yet adults, confined to their homes with caregivers and siblings, missing social lives at an extremely social age, and trying to learn how to distance learn on the fly. In a world where a large chunk of them do not have and never had the resources to learn well to begin with. Imagine returning to school in the fall, having missed an entire 2 months of the education your classmates were getting because you have no internet access or computer at home, because your parents are essential and can't be there to support you, because your home is unsafe, because you have no home to be confined to. For all vulnerable kids, the already egregious education gap is widening as we speak. And it's not just that young people are struggling right now, because we know the elders are not all right either. They're most susceptible to this pandemic, and our longtime poor treatment of the eldest of our society, relegating them to underfunded and understaffed care facilities, has set them up to be in even greater danger now. My point here is that actually none of us are all right, but the beauty of youth, the gifts of youth, if we can appreciate and embrace them, may liberate all of us in the end. When I was a little kid, 7 or 8 maybe, I was terrified to become a teenager. In my child's mind, everyone knew that teenagers are bad. And I figured becoming one, I'd inevitably turn to a life of loitering and petty disrespect myself. Teens were always doing drugs and crimes on TV shows. They were, more poignantly perhaps, the ones always being scolded by adults, butting heads with adults, exasperating adults in my real life. Young people get a bad rap, but young people, like not the 35-year-olds like me who still get called a young adult, but actual young people young enough to know what a TikTok is, they have been at the forefront of nearly every movement for progress and justice to ever sweep the globe. It was the NAACP's Youth Council whose sit-ins kicked off the civil rights movement. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was only 25 when he joined that same movement. Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, the founders of STAR, were 23 and 17, respectively, when the Stonewall riots kicked off the modern gay liberation movement. It was high school students in Florida who started a national organization to end gun violence. Greta Thunberg was only 15 when she initiated a worldwide school strike for the climate. Malala Yousafzai began her advocacy campaign for the rights of girls and women under the Taliban rule when she was only 12. Young adults led the cause for apartheid divestment, started the Arab Spring, are leading the way in the Black Lives Matter movement. These are not all today's young people. Progress at the hands of youth is a reality older than this generation or their parents or even their parents' generation. Our very country was founded by disaffected youth. Consider the ages of some of the nation's founders when the American Revolution began. James Madison was 25. Alexander Hamilton, 21 when he signed the Declaration of Independence. Aaron Burr was 20. Betsy Ross, 24. John Jay, just 30. The Marquis de Lafayette was 18 when he brought a whole nation into the struggle. In every generation, it is youth who push us all forward. In spite of my childhood fears and prejudices, I have become an adult who loves teenagers. They are, in my estimation, people in a uniquely wonderful phase of life. I'll grant you without hesitation that adolescence is hard, and that, therefore, being around adolescents can sometimes also be hard. But youth is a state of being that can offer incredible gifts to us and our communities, to the world. First of all, young folks tend to have a particular affinity for risk. Their still developing frontal cortices are sometimes a danger, leading to decisions that are actually harmful. But often they lead to decisions that simply seem like a danger to us risk-averse older folks. Communities like ours need prudence and care, but they also need risk to survive. Young people, quite beautifully, are less encumbered by the burden of thinking of all of the reasons not to do something. And it scares us sometimes to let that kind of uninhibitedness lead. But without that freedom, there are so many important and good and necessary things that we as a society, we as a church would just never do. Another thing people are particularly good at in the phase of adolescence is relationship. It is a distinctive gift of youth to place a high value on social relationships. Relationship is at the heart of justice, at the heart of any change for the good, at the heart of faith. All theology, to my mind, begins from a place of relationship and co-creation with the universe or the divine. We are because we are we, because we are part of a whole, in relationship to a wider web, not just a series of discrete individuals. We start to forget this sometimes in later adulthood, but for young people, relationships are sacred. This can be a hardship for those of us with teens in our lives, sure. The differentiation from family and embrace of relationships all their own can be a rough road. The influence of friends on their choices, the desire to be with beloved friends, to be in contact with them constantly. I imagine that ranges from annoying to terrifying for parents of adolescents. Teens' extreme sensitivity to ruptures in relationship, like canaries in a coal mine, can make it difficult to be with them when things are hard. All that is true. But the reminder that relationship is sacred can be a gift from them to us, to all of us, if we allow it to be. Finally, it's young people's particular intolerance for injustice that makes them change makers in every era. It might seem to come across most often with the slam of a bedroom door and shouts about what is and is not fair for those who live with youth. But the very same fiery passion for fairness is exactly what can and does recreate the world in the shape of justice. Because it's young people who are also slamming the door on class and racial oppression. It's young people shouting down the tyranny of curfews and dictators alike. And if we retain the gifts of youth, respect the wisdom of youth, then it's all of us together doing that. Baby boomers, arguably, understood better in their own youth than any other generation how the gifts of youth, the wisdom of youth could change the world. Get out of the way if you can't lend a hand, they insisted. And now, especially now in the midst of this crisis, I hope they'll be the generation who help the church remember how to value the gifts of youth, the wisdom they retain from their own adolescence, and the wisdom of current young folks. Because it's up to all of us to trust the wisdom of young people in their own experience, in their own hearts, in their own deep listening. Mark Iaconelli, who was a spiritual director and the founder of Youth Specialties, writes about the way churches share ministry with youth, saying, instead of a witness to their lives, youth are offered programs and activities. Yet we adults know that the people who've had the greatest impact on our lives, the people who've changed and shaped us, the people who were present to us, those are the people who received us in the midst of our pain as well as our breakthroughs. I told the story from earlier this morning of Ellen Craft and William Craft and Theodore Parker's decision to protect them during a sermon at the Albany UU congregation a couple years ago. I was preaching that morning about the importance of their congregational vote to become a sanctuary site, willing to house undocumented people facing deportation. A few weeks later, on the Sunday of that congregational vote, the youth members of the congregation, unable to vote on the resolution themselves, had all arrived early and lined the hallway to the community hall with posters advocating for sanctuary. A particular teenaged member approached me before the meeting. He handed me a solid wood sword and pistol, beautifully hand-carved. I made these for you, he muttered in the kind of barely audible mumble that teen boys are so especially good at. Like Theodore Parker's sword and pistol, they're to keep as a reminder to be bold and determined if ICE shows up, he said. A little self-conscious, his eyes were downcast, but he flashed a devious grin as he added, my mom wouldn't let me give you a real pipe bomb, so I learned woodworking instead. It may be odd decor for a person committed to nonviolence, but those wooden weapons have a place of honor in my office at home. They remind me of that young man's bravery and of young Ellen Craft's. They admonish me to trust in the wisdom of youth, the boldness of each new generation. They are a message to my heart that justice requires real risk. Justice feels dangerous. It's true, young people are in a state of radical becoming, but they are also whole as they are right now. To be in ministry alongside them with love is to be present with them in the wisdom and experience of their whole selves. And if we can manage that, the radical becoming of youth may be a radical becoming for our whole world. May this church always be a place where we feel the true danger of freedom, like sailing on a sled down the steepest of slopes. May we never forget the wisdom of being bold together. May it always be so.
May God's blessing keep you all. May your wishes all come true. May you always do for others and that others do for you. May you build a ladder to the stars and climb on every rung. May you stay forever young. May you grow upright and be strong, and may you stay forever young, forever young. May you stay forever young. May your hands always be busy. May your feet always be swift. May you have a strong foundation when the wind of change is shift. May your heart always be joyful. May your song always be sung. May you stay forever young. Forever young. Forever young. May you stay forever young.
Before we sing our closing hymn, I leave you with these words from the writer Goethe. Whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Let's sing together our closing hymn, One More Step.
One more step. We will take one more step. Till there is peace for us and everyone. We'll take one more step. One more word. We will say one more word. Till every word is heard by everyone. We'll say one more word. One more prayer. We will say one more prayer. Till every prayer is shared by everyone. We'll say one more prayer. One more song. We will sing one more song. Till every song is sung. We'll sing one more song.
If you've lit a chalice in your own home, now is the time for us to extinguish our chalices together. So I invite you to imagine, with your eyes open or closed, maybe open if you're extinguishing a chalice, that we are together in one big space, hands reaching out, hands grasping one another as we extinguish our flames together. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment, those we carry in our hearts until we are together again.